I, 28F, have been with my husband James, and 29M for 6 years, married for 3. We met in college when I was a junior and he was a senior. From the beginning, I noticed James had a close relationship with his best friend Tom's younger sister, Jennifer, 20F. At first, I thought it was sweet how he looked out for her like a big brother. James and Tom had been friends since high school. They played on the same soccer team and became inseparable. James spent a lot of time at Tom's house, which is how he got to know Jennifer. She was only 11 when they met, and James, being 18 at the time, took on a sort of mentoring role. He'd help her with homework, teach her soccer tricks, and was always there to listen when she had problems at school. As our relationship progressed, I noticed how often James would bring up Jennifer in conversation. He'd share stories about her accomplishments, laugh about inside jokes they had, and generally speak about her with a lot of affection. I didn't think much of it initially. After all, he'd known her for years and watched her grow up. When we started dating seriously, Jennifer was 15. She'd often asked to tag along on our dates, especially if we were going to the movies or grabbing ice cream. James always seemed happy to include her, and I went along with it because I wanted to make a good impression on his friends and their families. Plus, Jennifer was fun to be around. Bubbly, quick-witted, and always up for an adventure. As time went on, though, I started to feel a bit uncomfortable with how much attention James gave her. There were times when we'd be on a date, and he'd spend half the time texting Jennifer or showing me funny memes she'd sent him. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was being silly for feeling jealous of a teenager. When we got engaged after 3 years of dating, Jennifer's reaction stuck with me. She pulled James aside at our engagement party and made him promise that getting married wouldn't change their relationship. I overheard her saying, "You can't forget about me just because you're going to be a boring married guy now." James laughed it off, assuring her he'd always be there for her. Despite my misgivings, I made Jennifer one of my bridesmaids. I thought it would help us bond and maybe ease some of the tension I was feeling. On the surface, everything seemed fine. Jennifer was enthusiastic about helping with wedding planning and seemed genuinely happy for us. But there were moments, like when she insisted on having a dance with James at the reception that lasted a bit too long, or when I caught her wearing his jacket at the end of the night. That made me uneasy. Shortly after the wedding, we moved to a different state for James's job. Part of me was relieved to have some distance from Jennifer and the rest of Tom's family. We lost touch with a lot of people back home, and for a while, things were great between James and me. We were. Focused on building our life together, exploring our new city, and settling into married life. But even with the distance, Jennifer remained a presence in our lives. She'd call James regularly, send him long emails about what was going on in her life, and tag him in countless social media posts. James always said I was reading too much into it, that Jennifer was just going through typical teenage stuff and needed a friendly ear. Last month, everything came to a head when Tom came to visit us and brought Jennifer along. She's 20 now, in her second year of college, and I was shocked by how much she'd changed. Gone was the gangly teenager I remembered. In her place was a confident, attractive young woman. As soon as she saw us, the first thing Jennifer said was how hot James had gotten and how glad she was that he didn't look like a boring married guy. Throughout their visit, Jennifer seemed to ignore my presence and was constantly trying to be close to James. She'd touch his arm when laughing at his jokes, sit unnecessarily close to him on the couch, and find excuses to be alone with him. I tried to rationalize it at first. Maybe she was just excited to see him after so long. Maybe I was overreacting. But as the visit went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I finally worked up the courage to talk to James about it. I told him Jennifer's behavior looked inappropriate and asked him to tell her to tone it down. He dismissed my concerns, saying Jennifer was just immature and acted that way with everyone. He reminded me that he'd known her since she was a kid and that I was reading too much into things. On their last night here, we hosted a dinner party for Tom, Jennifer, and a few of our local friends. Throughout the evening, Jennifer kept pulling James away to play games or chat, giggling at me whenever I tried to join them. I felt like I was being deliberately excluded in my own home. The breaking point came at dinner. Jennifer came in last and dramatically announced there were no seats left. Then, to my horror, she plopped herself right on James's lap. The room went silent. I waited for James to say something, to tell her to get off, but he just laughed awkwardly and said, "Come on, Jennifer, you're not a kid anymore." Jennifer got up, giggling and winking at me as she took another seat. I was furious. Not just at Jennifer's blatant disrespect, but at James for not shutting it down immediately. I excused myself, got in my car, and drove to my sister's house. I needed space to calm down before I said something I'd regret. An hour later, James called asking where I was. I told him I was at my sister's and would come home after Jennifer left. He got angry, accusing me of overreacting and embarrassing him in front of his friends. I couldn't believe he was more concerned about how it looked to them than how I felt. When I came home the next day, we had a huge fight. I told James how hurt I was by Jennifer's behavior and by him enabling it. I brought up all the little incidents over the years that had made me uncomfortable, the long phone calls, the inside jokes, the constant texting. I told him it felt like Jennifer was more important to him than I was. James got defensive. He accused me of being insecure and said I was being ridiculous about his little sister. He brought up how I'd never had a problem with Jennifer before, conveniently forgetting all the times I'd expressed discomfort over the years. He said I was trying to make him choose between his family and me. I said regardless of his intentions, Jennifer was being disrespectful to our marriage and I didn't want her in our home again. James asked if I was giving him an ultimatum. I asked if he was really willing to disregard my feelings for Jennifer's sake. The argument escalated, with both of us saying hurtful things. Finally, James said he couldn't live with someone so insecure and controlling. He packed a bag and left to stay with his parents. It's been a week and he's barely responding to my texts or calls. When he does reply, it's short and cold. I'm hurt and confused. I thought we had a strong marriage, but this whole situation has made me question everything. To make matters worse, Tom texted me saying I was a horrible person for trying to come between James and Jennifer's special bond. He said their friendship was none of my business, and that I should be grateful James had such a close relationship with his family. Jennifer sent me a message too. It was dripping with condescension, saying how sorry she was for making me feel so insecure, but that I shouldn't have thrown a tantrum and ruined everyone's night. She said James had always been there for her, and that I was selfish for trying to change that. I'm at a loss. I love James, but I'm so hurt by how he's handled this. Am I crazy for being uncomfortable with their relationship? How can I make him understand my perspective? I don't know how to move forward from here. Part of me wants to fight for our marriage, but another part wonders if I'll ever be able to trust him again. How can I compete with a bond that's been there since before I was in the picture? I keep replaying everything in my mind, wondering if I really am overreacting. But then I remember the look on Jennifer's face when she sat on James's lap, the way she smirked at me, and I know in my gut that something isn't right. I just don't know what to do about it. Edit. Thank you all for the supportive comments. To clarify some things, James and I are 29 and 28. Jennifer is 20. James has known Jennifer since she was about 7 years old. At the dinner party, it was me, James, Tom, Jennifer, and 2 other couples, all close friends. I've reached out to one of the other couples who were there to get their perspective on what happened after I left. Update 1. First, I want to thank everyone for their support and advice. It's been incredibly helpful to get outside perspectives on this situation. The past week has been a roller coaster of emotions, and I'm grateful for this community's support. I spoke with our friends Sarah and Mike, who were at the dinner party. They've been our friends since we moved here, and I trust their judgment. They were very sympathetic and confirmed that things got very awkward after I left. Sarah told me that she and the other women at the party had confronted Jennifer about her behavior. They told her it was disrespectful to me and to my marriage with James. According to Sarah, Jennifer burst into tears, claiming everyone was attacking her over a silly joke, and that she didn't mean any harm. Sarah said Jennifer's reaction seemed over the top and manipulative, like she was trying to make herself the victim. Mike told me that he and the other guys had pulled James aside and told him he needed to set clearer boundaries with Jennifer. Mike said James seemed really conflicted and upset, unsure of how to handle the situation. Apparently, James kept saying he didn't want to hurt Jennifer's feelings or damage his friendship with Tom. This information made me feel somewhat validated, knowing others had seen the inappropriate behavior too. But I was still hurt that James hadn't stood up for our marriage in the moment. It bothered me that he seemed more concerned about Jennifer's feelings than mine. I decided to reach out to James's parents to get their take on the situation. His mom, Linda, has always been kind to me, and I hoped she might be able to offer some insight or help. Linda was shocked when I explained what had happened. She had no idea about the dinner party incident or that James was staying with them because of our fight. Apparently, he'd just said we'd had a small disagreement and he needed some space. This hurt me even more. James wasn't even being honest with his parents about why he'd left. As I filled Linda in on the details, including the history with Jennifer, she grew increasingly upset. She said she'd always thought Jennifer's attachment to James was a bit odd, but had assumed it was harmless. Linda shared some background I hadn't known before. Apparently, when Jennifer was younger, her parents went through a nasty divorce. James had been a stable presence in her life during that time, often babysitting her or taking her out to distract her from the fighting at home. While this information helped me understand the roots of their bond, it didn't excuse the current situation. Linda agreed. She was furious when I told her about the lap-sitting incident and James's reaction. She promised to talk to James and try to make him see reason. A few hours later, James called me. He sounded upset and said his mom had read him the riot act. He apologized for dismissing my feelings and admitted that he should have shut down Jennifer's behavior. Immediately. However, he still maintained that I had overreacted by leaving the party. He said it made him look bad in front of our friends and that I should have talked to him privately instead of storming out. This frustrated me. I felt like he was still more concerned about appearances than my feelings. We argued for a while, with me trying to explain that it wasn't about him or even really about Jennifer. It was about respect for our marriage. I told him I felt like he'd chosen Jennifer's feelings over mine, and that hurt deeply. I brought up all the little incidents over the years, the constant texting, the long phone calls, the inside jokes, and how they had made me feel like an outsider in my own marriage. James got defensive again, saying I was twisting things and that he'd always been faithful to me. He accused me of trying to control who he could be friends with. I reminded him that I'd never had an issue with any of his other female friends, just Jennifer, because of her inappropriate behavior. I also brought up how he'd confided in Tom about our fight but lied to his parents. I asked him why. If he truly believed he'd done nothing wrong, he felt the need to hide the real reason for staying with them. This seemed to catch him off guard, and he struggled to come up with an explanation. The conversation ended with both of us frustrated and no real resolution. James said he needed more time to think and that he'd call me in a few days. I felt drained and disheartened. It seemed like every time we talked, we just went in circles without really addressing the core issues. I'm feeling really lost and conflicted. On one hand, I'm glad James finally seems to be taking my concerns somewhat seriously. On the other hand, I'm hurt that it took his mother's intervention for him to even consider my perspective. And I'm still angry that he seems more concerned about maintaining his relationship with Jennifer than addressing the damage to our marriage. I've decided to stay with my sister for a while longer. Being in our house alone just makes me sad and anxious. My sister has been incredibly supportive, reminding me that I deserve a partner who puts our marriage first. She's been helping me process my feelings and think through what I want for my future. I find myself replaying moments from our relationship, wondering if there were signs I missed. I remember how James would light up when Jennifer called, how he always seemed to prioritize her needs. I think about all the times I swallowed my discomfort because I didn't want to seem jealous or controlling. Now I wonder if I should have spoken up sooner. I'm trying to stay strong and not cave just because I miss James. I know we need to fully address this issue if we have any hope of moving forward. But I'm scared that maybe our values and priorities are just too different to reconcile. I love James, but I don't know if I can be with someone who doesn't put our marriage first. For now, I'm taking things day by day. I'm focusing on self-care and leaning on my support system. I've even started seeing a therapist to help me process everything. I know I need to be in a good place mentally before I can make any big decisions about my marriage. I'll update again when I have more news. Thank you all again for your support and advice during this difficult time. It means more than you know. Update 2. It's been about 2 weeks since my last update, and a lot has happened. I've been doing a lot of thinking and soul-searching, trying to figure out what I want and need from my relationship. James finally came home after staying with his parents for over a week. We had a long, intense conversation about everything that had happened. He admitted that his mom and dad had really made him think about his behavior and how it must have looked from my perspective. He apologized sincerely for dismissing my feelings and for not setting clear boundaries with Jennifer. He said he'd been blind to how her behavior had changed as she got older, still seeing her as the little girl he used to babysit. James acknowledged that he should have shut down her flirting immediately, and that he'd let things go too far out of a misplaced sense of loyalty to his friend's family. I appreciated his apology, but I told him I was still hurt by how quickly he'd left when we argued, and how he'd seemed more concerned with Jennifer's feelings than mine. We talked for hours, really digging into our issues around trust, respect, and priorities in our marriage. One thing that came out of our conversation was that James had always felt a sense of responsibility for Jennifer. He shared more details about her parents' divorce when she was younger. Apparently, it had been really ugly, with a lot of fighting and Jennifer often caught in the middle. James had been a stable presence in her life during that time, often being the one to pick her up from school when her parents were too busy arguing, or letting her hang out at his house when things were bad at home. While I could understand that history, I stood firm that it didn't excuse Jennifer's current behavior or James's enabling of it. I told James that for us to move forward, he needed to set clear, firm boundaries with Jennifer and prioritize our marriage. We also talked about how James had confided in Tom, but lied to his parents about why he'd left. James admitted he was embarrassed and didn't want his parents to think badly of him. He realized this was a sign that on some level, he knew his behavior had been inappropriate. James agreed that changes needed to be made. He said he'd already spoken to Tom about the situation. Apparently, Tom was mortified when he heard the full story of what happened at the dinner party. He apologized to James for his angry text to me and promised to have a serious talk with Jennifer about her behavior. As for Jennifer herself, James showed me a message he'd sent her. In it, he explained that her behavior had been inappropriate and disrespectful to our marriage. He told her that while he cared about her as a family friend, he needed to create some distance in their relationship out of respect for me and our marriage. He made it clear that any future interactions would need to include me and maintain appropriate boundaries. Jennifer's response was pretty immature. She accused me of manipulating James and trying to cut her out of his life. She said some nasty things about me and our relationship, claiming that I was insecure and controlling. James shut it down immediately, telling her that this was his decision and that he wouldn't tolerate her disrespecting me or our marriage. I felt proud of James for finally standing up to Jennifer, but I'm still struggling to fully trust him again. The whole situation has brought up a lot of insecurities and doubts that I didn't even realize I had. I told James that while I appreciated the steps he was taking, it would take time for me to feel secure in our relationship again. We've agreed to try couples counseling to work on our communication and rebuild our trust. James has also promised to be more transparent about his interactions with Jennifer or any of Tom's family in the future. He's committed to putting our marriage first and working to regain my trust. For now, we're taking things day by day. I'm cautiously optimistic, but still guarding my heart a bit. I know it will take time to fully heal from this, but I'm glad we're both committed to working on our marriage. I'm still staying with my sister for now, but James and I are spending time together each day. We're trying to reconnect and remember why we fell in love in the first place. It's been nice to just talk and laugh together without the shadow of this drama hanging over us. I'll update again if there are any major developments. Thank you all again for your support and advice throughout this difficult time. It's been a challenging journey, but I feel like I'm starting to see a way forward. Update 3. It's been about a month since my last update, and I wanted to share some final thoughts on this situation. A lot has happened, and while things aren't perfect, we're making progress. James and I have been attending couples counseling regularly, and it's been really helpful in improving our communication and understanding each other's perspectives better. We've had some tough conversations, but I feel like we're finally on the same page about priorities in our marriage. One major development is that James has decided to go low contact with Tom's entire family, including Jennifer. He realized that maintaining such close ties with them was causing unnecessary stress in our relationship. He's told them that while he values their friendship, he needs to focus on our marriage right now. Tom was understanding and respectful of James's decision. He apologized again for his initial reaction and said he hoped we could all move past this eventually. Jennifer, on the other hand, didn't take it well. She sent a series of angry messages to both of us, accusing me of manipulating James and ruining their friendship. She said some pretty hurtful things, bringing up private moments she'd shared with James over the years and implying that their bond was stronger than our marriage. James shut it down firmly, reiterating that this was his choice and that her behavior was exactly why he needed distance. He blocked her number and social media accounts, which I appreciate. It shows he's serious about setting boundaries. I'm proud of how James has handled things, but I'd be lying if I said everything was perfect now. I still have moments of insecurity or doubt, especially when I think about how quickly James was willing to dismiss my feelings initially. There are times when I wonder if he's truly changed, or if he's just saying what he thinks I want to hear. We're working through these issues in counseling, and I can see real effort from him to rebuild my trust. He's been more open about his day-to-day activities, checking in with me regularly, and making a point to prioritize our time together. We've also been working on strengthening our own relationship, spending more quality time together and really focusing on each other. We've started a weekly date night where we try new restaurants or activities in our area. It's been nice to reconnect without the shadow of this drama hanging over us. As for me, this whole experience has taught me a lot about standing up for myself and my boundaries. I'm glad I didn't just sweep my feelings under the rug or let myself be gaslit into thinking I was overreacting. I've been working on being more assertive in other areas of my life too, and it feels empowering. I've also realized the importance of having my own support system outside of my marriage. My sister and friends have been invaluable throughout this process, offering a listening ear and outside perspective when I needed it most. There have been some unexpected consequences of this situation. Some of our mutual friends have taken sides, with a few suggesting I should just get over it and stop being so insecure. It's been hurtful, but it's also shown me who my true friends are. I know we still have work to do, but I'm cautiously optimistic about our future. James seems committed to making our marriage work, and I'm trying to open myself up to trusting him again. It's a slow process, but we're taking it one day at a time. Thank you all again for your support throughout this journey. Your advice and perspectives were invaluable in helping me navigate this difficult situation. I've learned so much about myself and what I need in a relationship. Whatever the future holds, I know I'll be okay.